Hey everybody, this is GGB. Today we're going to be talking about what happened yesterday in the Big East, ACC, and in the Mountain West Conference. What can happen into today in the Big 12, Big 10, and Pac-12. I hope you guys are excited, so let's get straight into this thing. In the Big East, we had some pretty important basketball teams playing. That's a little bit of an understatement. It was to determine who was going to win the Big East. Now, if Creighton had won last night, they did not, spoiler alert, they would have taken the lead in the Big East. They wouldn't have outright won it. Now, Villanova won, so they outright win the Big East. Now, there were no upsets yesterday, so half a point for me. But they didn't outright. They outright won the Big East, so they joined Baylor and Alabama as the only three major conferences. There's only three major conference. They're the only three that have won their conference as of right now. Villanova has locked themselves up for the 1 seed in the Big East tournament. So that's definitely going to be interesting moving forward. Villanova is one of the better basketball teams in this, but they lost Colin Gillespie last night. I'm going to see interested how they do that, how they do moving forward with the Colin Gillespie injury. You could see it in the second half. They looked lost at times. They play Providence, who's not a horrible team. They're not great, but they're also not garbage. So we're gonna see how that goes for the Wildcats. Moving on to the ACC, we had Florida State taking on Boston College. Now, Florida State ended up winning this game, which means they still have to worry about that last game on their schedule. I mean, it's not a hard game against Notre Dame, but if they do lose it and Virginia wins, then Virginia takes the regular season ACC title. So, again, very important game coming up against Notre Dame. Notre Dame has a chance to ruin Florida State's hope of being the 1 seed in the Atlantic Coast Conference tournament. Now, if you're a Virginia Tech fan, you're kind of rooting for Virginia, weirdly enough, on Saturday. I'll get into that later. Florida State keeps first place, and Boston College is still in last place. So that's what happened, if you were wondering, last night in the ACC. Nothing really changed. Mountain West, on the other hand, we had no changes. San Diego State picked up their 11th straight win. Very good basketball team. I think a very good team at the moment. So it's going to be interesting moving forward. I think this is a 4-team race in the Mountain West. Whether San Diego State, Colorado State, and Utah State or Boise State comes out with it, I'm going to be very interested to see what happens over there. Now, let's get into the games today. We have a lot of Big 12 games today. I hope you guys are excited. We have one of the best games of the day, in my opinion, is a Big 12 game. So let's get into them. We have at 6 o'clock, number 17, Oklahoma State traveling to number 3, Baylor. Baylor being favored by 12 points on ESPN2. At 6 o'clock, we have Iowa State traveling to number 18, Texas Tech. Texas Tech being favored by 17 points on this game on ESPN+. At 6 o'clock, we also have TCU traveling to number 6, West Virginia. West Virginia, the Mountaineers, are favored by 13 points here on ESPN+. At 7 o'clock, we have UTEP traveling to number 13, Kansas. Now, this isn't going to affect really anything in the Big 12, considering UTEP's an out-of-conference game. So it's a chance to pick up a quality win if you're UTEP, but also not hurt you with a loss. It could really hurt Kansas with a loss, but it's not going to hurt them in the Big 12 standings, whether they win or lose tonight. It's not going to progress their case. At 8 o'clock, we have number 5, Texas, at number 15, Texas, traveling to number 16, Oklahoma. I think that's one of the better games of the day. But let's get into what could happen with a win or a loss from each team. Now, obviously, if you're a West Virginia fan, you're hoping you win tonight. If you win tonight over Iowa State, you're second place. In the Big 12, you pass Kansas. Now, that could be a very momentarily change. You know, Kansas still has a little bit more games on their... Actually, as long as you don't mess up, Kansas has no chance to pass you. As long as West Virginia wins out, if you're West Virginia, very excited, because if you win against TCU tonight and Oklahoma State on Saturday, then you are second place in the Big 12 tournament, so that'd be very exciting if you're a Mountaineers fan. On the other side of things, if you're a Texas fan, you're hoping for a West Virginia loss. With a West Virginia loss, they move to 10-6. Now, I've been looking at this for Texas. If Texas was to win this basketball game, they move to 10-6 also. Obviously, you're also hoping for Oklahoma State to lose if you're a Texas fan. If Oklahoma State loses to Baylor tonight, Texas can pass West Virginia, because if you look at the series, they've split their series, so each of them won one game. So then it goes to the record percentages. Technically speaking, Texas would have a better win percentage in the record column, the overall record column, which means Texas can be third place tonight if they play their cards right and win, and also other things work out for them. Again, you also have to hope for, it's not just Texas holds their fate in their hands. You have to hope Oklahoma State doesn't upset Baylor, which is the more likely of the two, and West Virginia doesn't gets upset by Iowa State. So that's what you're hoping for if you're a Texas fan. You're watching very intently the Oklahoma State game. The Oklahoma State game is a very important part because at the very least, even if West Virginia doesn't lose today, you can move up a spot to fourth place. And now fourth place is a very, very nice place to be in the Big 12 standings. Now, if you're a Texas Tech fan, you're really rooting for Texas tonight, weirdly enough. You can pass Oklahoma with a loss. Either team you're going to pass with a win or a loss, but I got to say I'd rather have Texas win if I was Texas Tech, because Oklahoma actually has a somewhat hard schedule to finish up the year. If you look at that, actually this is their last game. But if Texas Tech wins tonight, Oklahoma loses. Again, it's a very interesting thing to talk about if you're Texas Tech. As long as Texas Tech does not get upset by Iowa State tonight, then they should be fine. They just need to win this game. Oklahoma loses their game, they'd be at 9-8. You could be at 9-7. Then you could still lose that game against who did they play? They played Baylor, but I'm going to double check how they did against Oklahoma this season. They won against their one game against. Actually, they've won both games against Oklahoma, so therefore they have the tiebreaker. So really, if you're a Texas Tech fan, you're hoping Oklahoma loses, because if Oklahoma loses and you win, you've basically locked up not having to play day one. And I mean, day one's not a horrible thing. Iowa State's not a tough team to beat. But as long as Texas Tech doesn't get upset tonight and Oklahoma loses to Texas. Now, Texas could also lose. Texas, if you're a Texas fan, you cannot afford a loss, because you would also drop to day one play if you lose today against Oklahoma. So this is a very important game for Texas. They can rise all the way up to third place. They can rise all the way up to third place, or they can fall all the way down to seventh. Actually, sixth. Sorry, sixth. They can fall to sixth place or rise to third. It's a very, very interesting scenario Texas is in. They have a chance to really hurt themselves or really gain something tonight. Looking at the Big Ten, we have two pretty big games today. Michigan plays Michigan State. Now, if Michigan is to win this game, Illinois loses all hope of winning the Big Ten. Michigan locks up the Big Ten with a win tonight against the Spartans. Now, though, if you are a Michigan fan, an Illinois fan, you're watching this game rather intently and really hoping for the Spartans. Remember, the Spartans have to sweep Michigan to end the season. That's very important for this moving forward. The fact that they have to sweep them to end the regular season, I mean, Michigan just has to win one and they win the conference. But Michigan State's been a very tough team recently. It's a hard team to beat. I gotta say, it's gonna be difficult down the stretch if you are Michigan State. Now, if Michigan State's to win today, they move to 9-10. They can get to a 15-10 record, and guess what? It goes three-way tie. Dang it. Unless Michigan State also beat Maryland, that gets into a very... no, they did not. Gets into a very interesting scenario. I don't like this. But Rutgers has a 9-10 record. Maryland has a 9-10 record. And in this instance, Michigan State would also have a 9-10 record. So, I mean, it's a really tough scenario. I mean, it would really help if Maryland did sweep Rutgers, which from what I'm looking at, it looks like it. Maryland, it looks like they only played once this season, and Maryland did beat Rutgers. So, that makes it easier to actually look at in the Big Ten terms of things. Maryland swept Rutgers and Michigan State. So that means even if Michigan State was to win today, they'd have the 9-10. So Maryland would have the tiebreaker over both of them. So then it really goes down between Rutgers and Michigan State. Rutgers and Michigan State split their... actually, I think Michigan State won both of them. It's so hard to keep track of all these games, guys. No, it looks like they split their regular season series. Rutgers won at Michigan State won at home, and the Rutgers won at home. So they split them. It'd go down to overall record, and the 15-10 record would be better than Rutgers' 13-10 record. So Michigan State would pass Rutgers today with a win. Would not be able to pass Maryland yet, but they would be able to pass Rutgers. So that's important moving forward. Michigan State could get a huge win, move past Rutgers today. Very important if you're a Spartans fan. Now, if you're weirdly enough, if you're a Purdue fan, you're really rooting for Nebraska today. Nebraska could pull off the huge upset against Iowa. You can move past Iowa to third place. Now, if you're a Penn State fan, I've gone both ways myself. I've been very interested. As it sits right now, Penn State, if they want, they would have to play Nebraska day one, which I'm fine with as a Penn State fan. Then we get to play Ohio State. Now, Ohio State, we've played 2 close games against them. I think it's possible to beat them, but then we'd have to play Purdue. Now, Purdue has crushed us both times, so if you're a Penn State fan, logistically, you'd love it if Nebraska could win today, right? Nebraska could pass, then Iowa would fall below Purdue. They would fall. Unfortunately, this would actually work out perfectly, unless you're an Iowa fan. If you're a Penn State fan, Iowa would fall past Purdue and Ohio State. That's what they would go. I mean, Iowa would split their series against Ohio State, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, no, they split their series against Ohio State. So that leaves the overall record, and just the fact is 18-7 record's better than an 18-8 record, which Iowa would have in this case. So if you're a Penn State fan, I guess you're rooting for Iowa in this game, because I would love to play Iowa, Ohio State. That would be my ideal getting through the playoffs tournament, and then just hope Illinois and Purdue are upset along the way, because, dang, I don't want to play either of those teams. But if you're a Purdue, Ohio State fan, you'd also want this. This is basically the dream. Though, if you're a Northwestern fan, you're against this desperately, right? Because Nebraska, if they beat Iowa, would move to 4-14, right? Then Northwestern plays them, so Nebraska would hold their own fate in their hands. Now, I don't believe they've played Northwestern. Northwestern has not played Nebraska yet this year, so this game would result in the tiebreaker. So if Nebraska wins this one, they set themselves in a position, if they beat Northwestern, then they can move up a spot to 13, and then Penn State has to play Northwestern day one. So it's going to be interesting moving forward. Nebraska, if I'm Nebraska, I would much rather play Minnesota than Penn State. I'm just saying. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, but I would much rather play Minnesota than Penn State. So Nebraska definitely has something to play for here as well. Pac-12, we have Colorado's the ranked team playing Arizona State. Now, Arizona State can move to 8-8. Can't move past Stanford quite yet. Stanford is still at 10-10. So they would be at 8-8. Again, that's a little bit worse of a record. There's still 500 percentages, but then you go 10 wins is better than 8 wins. So, I mean, just of course, Stanford would stay ahead of them if Arizona State was to pull off the upset. Colorado's not falling with a win or a loss. Arizona State's also not falling with a loss either. They've pretty much assured themselves at the very least they'll be ahead of Utah. Definitely doesn't look like Utah can catch them at this point. Colorado, on the other hand, with a win, can pass UCLA for third place. Definitely seems impossible for Colorado to pass Oregon and win the conference. I think really the conference comes down to USC and Oregon. It's just Colorado has too many losses, and Oregon only has 1 game left on their schedule. But I definitely think it's going to be interesting. Colorado's playing a Arizona State team that's been hot recently, won 3 straight. So is Colorado State. So a 3-game winning streak is ending today. So let's see who it is. Who does GGB think is going to pull off the upset today? In my personal opinion, I've got to go with Oklahoma over Texas. Now, I love my Texas Longhorns, but they've shown some susceptibility recently. Not to say that Oklahoma hasn't. They've definitely shown that they can be beaten too. But Texas definitely hasn't been consistent lately. And I gotta say, I think it's the easiest bet. But hey, everybody, this is GGB, co-host Pepper saying adios amigos, and go Sooners.